Okay, I think we're going to get started now. So thank you for joining me for today's webinar. Today's webinar is Countering Emerging Threats to Mass Transit with Smart Tech. Today's webinar is brought to you by IREX and sponsored by Intel. Today's guest is subject matter expert Don L Rondeau. Don is a subject matter expert in critical infrastructure protection. He's served as a senior advisor for federal, state, and local governments, working with government entities such as TSA, FEMA, the Department of Defense, and the Department of Homeland Security. Don's background includes 20+ years working at metros across the United States, such as the New York subway, and he's also now involved with smart cities. So Don has a fantastic blend to discuss what we will be talking about today, which is countering emerging threats to mass transit with smart tech. So great to have you here today, Don.
Daniel, thank you for the invite. Thank you for having me.
Great.
I appreciate that intro and I appreciate everyone's attendance today. And again, thank you for having me. Yeah, over the last 20 years or so, I've really been trained, taught, mentored with great partners at the Fed, state, and local level, and with an emphasis on those critical infrastructure owner-operators with the industry that operates critical infrastructure like our transit system. So certainly appreciate all of that and look forward to continuing to contribute to that discussion.
Brilliant. So Don, obviously in recent lights of events, I'm going to jump straight into it. Is violent crime on the rise in the mass transit system, in particular in the United States?
You know, I think the answer is yes, with a few caveats. One, we have to remember that transit systems are a part of major cities. And so we know that there is an increase in violent crime in major metropolitan cities in the US right now. And while some of that is now starting to subside, that law enforcement, municipalities are starting to get a handle on it, you cannot have a low crime transit system in a high crime city. That's very difficult to do. So, so the caveat is yes, with some explanation that transit systems are not alone in experiencing some high crime, higher than normal levels.
Yeah, I mean, it's great that you bring that up. Like in a high crime area, it's very hard to have low crime in mass transit. But obviously, the world's not been a normal place in the last 18 months to 2 years. So how much do you think like things like lockdown and the pandemic has played a part in the increase in violent crime in the mass transit?
Daniel, that's a great question. And in fact, I've been having discussions with my Smart City Consortium members about just that, and not looking at transit systems as standalone operations, but recognizing that there are a component to a municipality, right? And so, you know, there's a great article in the New York Times 2 weeks ago that talks about pre-pandemic crime in transit systems and its relationship to ridership levels and the complexity associated with we need riders. The lack of riders may be contributing to an emboldened criminal element. And now riders will not utilize the transit system or are hesitant in some cases to use the transit system because of the crime. So we have to figure out our way kind of around that. But there certainly seems to be some sort of post-pandemic lockdown relationship between crime, ridership, and mass transit systems.
Yeah, I think you bring up a great point where you're talking about the post-pandemic and the pre-pandemic, because it seems that technology has been accelerated in the last few years. I mean, look, we're all on Zoom right now. How do you think that the influx of smart cities is going to play a role with the safety of critical infrastructures?
Well, it's a very interesting time indeed. So we've had lockdowns and mandates that has impacted ridership and passengers in the transit system. During that same period of time, there have been advances in smart tech. So over the course of the last 2 years, there have been a big a leap forward in smart city technology and smart city thrust by a host of different entities around the world. And so I still look at security challenges in the transportation environment through the lens of the anti-terrorism professional, from the Homeland Security professional. But I also look at it through the lens of the smart city community. And the difference is this. From the smart city perspective, we look at it holistically and understand that critical infrastructure is part of what comprises a municipality. There is no standalone infrastructure. There are no standalone systems. And so we're able to kind of borrow concepts and leverage tools, techniques from supporting and other infrastructure to the transit system. When I look at it from the Homeland Security and anti-terrorism perspective, I'll give you a great example of this. The Department of Homeland Security has, in my mind, a very robust explosive detection division or effort headed by science and technology. And they're really focused on this curb to platform layered approach to security. That is to say, the second you hit the curb of a transit system, that you are being engaged by various policies, protocols, tools, technologies that sense explosives, images that represent a security concern, things of that nature, from the curb to the platform. When you look at it from the smart city perspective, you're certainly taking into account curb to platform, but I think it expands your viewpoint to community, to curb, to platform, to vehicle. And so I think that provides a more comprehensive perspective, and that allows us to understand that transit systems don't exist as systems by themselves, and that some of the threats to transit systems, of course, exist beyond the curb, before they get there. And some of the conditions that impact crime, terrorism, safety, certainly may attack a system, may utilize a system, but they exist long before they ever hit the curb. And they continue to exist in the vehicle, in the subway car, in the transit bus, and in the light rail car.
So what you're discussing really, especially when you're involved in the community, is sort of a collaboration of sensors, a collaboration between society, law enforcement, between the public and private sectors. Do you want to elaborate on that a little bit more?
Well, absolutely. You know, part of the evolution of critical infrastructure protection, of Homeland Security, has been this refined recognition that just as the Department of Homeland Security has Homeland Security expertise, industry has the genius when it comes to how to own and operate their systems. They're typically represented by great stakeholder associations and have established communication portals and conduits like ISACs. The mass transit system is represented by an ISAC, the Surface Transportation Information Sharing Analysis Center. So part of it now is this recognition that agency does not have to tell industry, and may not be able to tell industry, how to protect itself, that there's more of this partnership that's illustrated by councils and committees where there's a meeting of the minds. I think we still have some challenges there. You know, we can't disrupt the transit system in an effort to protect it. And so I think we're going to have to continue to expand upon those relationships and leverage tools, technologies that not only don't disrupt it, but maybe even enhance transit systems beyond safety and security. I'll give you an example, if I may, Daniel, is that, you know, I had a conversation with people in industry and agency, and I think everyone is aware that there are ways now, using your smart devices that everybody carries, to maybe enhance passenger ticketing and fare purchasing, that there are ways to leverage the information on your smartphone and voluntarily contributed to track geofence. There are tools that are now being utilized outside of transit systems to detect gunshots, to detect weapons, motion, all of these things before the curb that can be integrated inside the transit system. And so your layered screening sensor detection approach is less likely to negatively impact the mass transit system when your screening and detection, AI enhanced, intelligence driven, starts long before it even hits the curb, and again continues into the vehicle.
Yeah, it's so difficult. You bring up a good point where you don't want to disrupt what is happening already. Mass transit is very much, obviously, you've got your metros, you've got your subways, but it also extends to airports as well, which are running most often like 24/7. So you're having to kind of go as the ship is moving, try to get the water out while the ship is moving. And it's very difficult to turn a ship when it's already sailing. So in that aspect, when you're talking about smart cities being able to help the mass transit system, then you start to think about the technology involved, and you touch on a few points there, from geofencing to artificial intelligence. In your mind, what are some smart technology kind of aspects which is going to help the mass transit system?
Great question. I'm working on a collaboration that involves U.S. Department of Homeland Security and Israeli colleagues and the equivalent agencies there. And one of the things we're looking at right now is gun detection. When I talk to public safety officials, they're still chasing the gold standard of response time. That they want to be able to get to the scene as soon as possible. Well, some of this user-friendly, low-cost gun detection technology allows you to send alerts and be aware of the presence of a weapon in a prohibited area before the first shot is fired. That's an example of something that can really enhance the response times and put our first responders in a position to make a difference, increase the odds of that. There are also detection technologies, user-friendly, scaled to meet some of the challenges of transportation that, for instance, can detect radiological material, radiation that you may understand could be a part of a radiological dispersion device, a dirty bomb. And so to be able to kind of partner, integrate technologies that can detect the presence of a gun, radiation, be able to determine the location of a gunshot, be able to integrate intelligence through the passenger ticketing and fare purchasing process to understand that there's the potential for a person or people who present risk in your transit system. When you're able to integrate all of that intelligence, risk-based decision-making, detection technologies from the community to the curb, to the platform, to the vehicle, I think we're better able to protect the transit systems without disrupting the transit systems. And key to that, Daniel, I'll close that loop by saying one of the things that I hear from transit systems is, we need the money to be able to purchase these tools. So yes, we're responsible, but we have to be able to afford these tools, and we can't buy a new must-have tool every budget cycle. And so, we talk about, as lay people, being able to have the equivalent of a software package, right? When I download my Office package in my laptop, I have everything I need to be able to operate my laptop. Well, transit system operators are looking for something similar. Their certified package, their suite of technology that can be deployed according to agreed upon standards that make the best sense, and that then can be updated, managed, maintained in a way that they don't have to be software technologist experts, that they can be experts in running a transit system.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what you touched on there as well, it's building upon the infrastructure which is available. Because, like you said, you're not going to want to introduce whole new systems, whole new hardware in a ship that's already moving, such as a transit system, whether it be a metro, a railway, an airport. So, if they've got that current infrastructure already, what do you think is kind of the pushback? What do you think is why do you think that lots of metros, mass transit has not adopted this smart technology yet?
I'm not sure that it's pushback. I think that there are a lot of people talking. There are a lot of voices, and sometimes those critical infrastructure owner operators can be inundated by officials and policies, rules, and regulations from different levels. A transit system crosses jurisdictions, is subject to fed, state, and local regulations. They have law enforcement concerns, all kinds of things to contend with. And so, to the extent that we can continue to speak with one voice, continue to create standards, but then empower transit systems to meet the standards. Ultimately, the standard has to be risk reduction, right? The ability to quantifiably reduce risk. And so one of the things we're working on with a great institution, the University of the Potomac in Washington, D.C., is a smart assessment. A smart assessment doesn't just focus on the surface transportation system or mass transit, but the totality of the systems in a city will tell you how smart you are. The University of Potomac and members of the Smart City Consortium, Smart City Group, and really a consortium that's international are working on identifying those standards and then certifying tools, processes, techniques that constitute smart, and that these tools can be deployed in a host of different environments in transit systems. And then what that does is empower owner operators to choose, to choose the tools they require to meet the standard. So there may be a standard, but there's a standard, but there could be a multitude of ways to customize the tools to meet that specific system's requirements. And so we believe that, that's always the best way to go about things, is to recognize that there is no one size fit all option. And that if you equip transit system owner operators with tools, that they are probably best equipped to meet a really pre-articulated standard.
Yeah, you bring up a good point as well when you talk about the standards and the technology. So, for example, when you connect into surveillance cameras, what already exist, and you've got the ability to run AI. So then at what point is weapon detection run? And then what point is facial recognition run? Because obviously we're in the realm right now in a world where facial recognition is this gray area. I think that 99.9% people agree with facial recognition, but it's at what point do we use it? Like, for example, if it's finding missing children and human trafficking victims, I think most people would agree that's good to use it for. But we're in this gray area where people don't want to get recognized for having outstanding parking tickets. So then how do you think that the realm, because obviously mass transit is going to be a way where there can be lots of obviously success stories and rescues from technology such as facial recognition, whereas you're going to get obviously a lot of gray area, that red tape, and also what you mentioned, the standards.
Yeah, so that's a great question. One of the things that I advocate for is to be able to leverage biometric facial recognition technology, but in a way that only identifies those people who may be disbarred. So think about aviation. There's a no-fly list. Now that fly list may have some challenges. I understand that, but there is the opportunity to create something similar in transit systems. I mean, there are certainly people that are associated with known and declared terrorist organizations that you may not want in your transit system. If you don't want them to fly, you may not want them to ride either. And so there are ways to configure and program systems to only recognize those people. to only sound off on those people. That's a programming fix. The question is, is do we, the community charged with protecting transit systems and other infrastructure, do we have the credibility to be able to approach the public and say, we're only identifying those who are disbarred, and that the disbarment, no ride, no fly list is current, politically neutral, and only in relationship to terrorism. Now, that being said, we have to remember, all terrorism is criminal, but not all crime is terrorism, right? So we have terrorism, we have violent crime, and then, we have initiatives to meet both terrorism and non-terrorism criminal behavior, but there is a gap and potentially an overlap that we have to really understand and recognize and configure our layered system of security to account for opportunities provided by the overlap and those gaps that exist between terrorism and non-terrorism related crime. And again, I continue to believe that the solution is to really kind of expand our viewpoint, looking at the totality of a municipality, the community, then to the curb, then to the platform, and then to the vehicle. The vehicle, the subway car, the light rail car, the transit bus, is vulnerable and often a target and often the scene of non-terrorism related crime. We now have, the ability to continue to detect in those mobile environments. And then when you couple that with the biometric screening, the explosive detection, the gun and weapon detection, the gunshot alert, and the radiological detection and reporting and censoring, we now have the ability to really kind of layer that from community, curb, platform, right into the vehicle, and then use all of that data to conduct an analysis that allows us to continue to maximize and protect the effectiveness and efficiency of the transit systems, but reduce risk by reducing people and situations that present a danger to the transit systems from ever getting on board.
Yeah, you can bring up a good point where you keep tapping into the community as well, because you're talking about obviously tools which will be able to minimize risk, but you're going to get some parts of the community that, like you said, if you only use the technology to detect known terrorists, but obviously the community are going to hear that and they have to be very trustworthy of those in handle of that technology to use it for good. So I think that the users, law enforcement, have to be audited as well, and it can come from the community to ensure that they are using this technology for the reasons which they're saying so, and they're not obviously keeping people's data, and they're using the technology as they say they are, because then that could also bridge the gap between the trust between the community and law enforcement, which it seems like it's as far apart as it's ever been.
Yeah, I agree with that. Credibility and transparency is needed to make this community all the way through the paradigm to vehicle to work. And that to be able to really fully maximize and leverage biometric technology, facial recognition technology, that you have to have trust. I think that that's why approaching it from the smart city, smart municipality, smart nation perspective makes great sense. That public safety is a component of that, but not the driver of that. That mass transit owner operators are a component, but not the driver. That the citizen, the community, the municipality is the driver of how to safely, securely, and transparently operate the municipality of which the mass transit is a component of.
Yeah, so you keep tapping back to the smart city, the collaboration between critical infrastructures and smart cities. So what do you foresee happening in the next 12 to 24 months, which is actually accelerating this partnership of smart, safe cities and the public and private sectors?
Listen, I'm already in discussions with organizations that are building smart cities, building smart communities, smart planned communities that have the ability to extend the protection that we're talking about at the curb or at the airport or outside the fence of a school or a energy uh, uh, producer, you know, across a municipality in a way that really doesn't infringe upon privacy. I mean, there are ways to detect covertly and overtly and transparently from radiological material, gunshots. You know, I had a great conversation with a first responder. It's a law enforcement officer who has been talking about her body worn camera system and how she really wishes she had a body worn camera system that was always on and the feed being streamed back to some database that was constantly analyzing the feed, that she is sure that she is in the presence of probably known criminals and may not know it, people who are in harm's way and may not know it. I mean, she would not know if she was around a trafficking victim until later when that stream is analyzed somewhere and those people and circumstances are identified. That impacts transit system security, right? When you know that you have another stream of a mobile trusted unit out in the community every day, and that body worn camera system is engaged and supporting public safety concerns. Again, it comes back to how do we make sure that we're being transparent? How do we effectively utilize that data in a way that drives AI enhanced intel analysis methodologies while protecting the privacy, protecting the infrastructure, protecting the ability of the mass transit system to operate more effectively, more efficiently. They do a great job now. They have great representation. I think that the key continues to be giving them great user-friendly tools that do not require them to be experts in smart technology, allowing them to meet a in-stone standard that they can then deploy these smart tools to meet that standard in a way that's customized to their risk and to their specific infrastructure.
So coming to the end now a little bit, Don, but I want to ask you, obviously 20 plus years working along the metros across the United States, now heavily involved with smart city projects. What do you think is available to mass transit systems, whether it be metros, airports, railways? What do you think is available and what do you see happening in the next 12 to 24 months in terms of the smart tech which will be deployed?
Well, smart tech is coming. I think a lot of the smart technology, broadly defined, will be funded by the infrastructure bill and other like funding mechanisms. I think that the Department of Homeland Security's Science and Technology Division continues to develop or review, inspect, if you will, technology. But ultimately, I see industry driving smart tech enhancements and upgrades in a way that soon you'll be able to download capabilities directly to your in-place infrastructure. You talked about the gun detection capability. That's a current project right now that I am involved in, where I anticipate very soon that transit systems will be able to download the ability to detect guns and leverage their in-place CCTV system to be able to do that. And then send alerts and things of this nature in a way that will allow them to impact the circumstance, to respond before the first shot is fired. And that's just one of many examples. And I see no reason why we can't make other detection and sensor technologies available in similar fashion or different but easier fashions. Again, I'm really impressed with some of the mobile radiological material radiation detection units. There are ground sensing capabilities that are being looked at for border security issues, but I think in prohibited areas where there's not supposed to be a person, that you can kind of combine that motion detection, radiation detection, weapon detection, gunshot detection capability with biometric technology, intel, risk management, and really have an impact that does not violate the Constitution, privacy, and enhances the quality of life and the efficiency of the transit system. And I think, again, this is not to take away from TSA, where I have great partners, great colleagues at DHS or transit system operators. I think that as we pull out from this a little bit, that we're going to see the productizing of capabilities, of tools that allow for easy usage. And again, it's happening right now. I'm really excited about it. I'm really excited to be involved in almost the kind of ground floor of this. And I look forward to continuing to engage my colleagues, clients, and mentors in the transit system in a way that will benefit the advancements of smart tech being deployed in transit systems.
Brilliant, Don. So thank you for that. I think it's a great time to wrap up at that point. This will be available on YouTube. Again, thank you at IREX and our sponsors Intel for bringing this webinar. A copy will be available on YouTube, which has Don's information for everybody to reach out to if you see fit. And yeah, thank you for attending.
Daniel, thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you very much for having me.
Brilliant. Thank you.